Suddenly Sheila, who was on the sidelines, said, "Listen Jufu's mother, we have to go straight to the exit to get out of here. If we run we might be able to catch up and then we can give the children to the bear to be taken out of here." Zombie Queen is relieved to hear that her husband is safe. But in the next moment, Sheila turned around and realized something was wrong. Ingshi and I also looked at our mother at the same time, because at that moment she was coughing up blood and saying, "Run while you can, the children's safety is the most important thing." Seeing the mother's hands tightly grasping the 2 spikes that pierced her body, I cried out in disbelief. But our mother yelled at us to run. Sheila is gritting her teeth at the sight. And then she called out to Ingshi to carry me and run with her toward the exit. Only the zombie queen was left shivering, holding back the one-eyed monster. In the next second, accompanied by a strong voice, a huge monster appears in front of the zombie queen. You make the wise decision to sacrifice yourself to save more people. But in the face of such a powerful monster, zombie queen doesn't have a trace of fear in her eyes. Instead, she stares at her opponent in anger. The one-eyed monster laughs at the sight. "Are you sure you're making the right choice?" Seeing my mother in so much pain, I could only keep crying. And then Sheila saw the horror through the faintest of lights. She saw that where Xiaoming was lying just now, his figure was nowhere to be seen. Just when Sheila thought he was still alive. Unbeknownst to Sheila, he's quickly coming up behind her. Sheila is caught off guard by Xiaoming's brutal beating. I saw her axe fall from her hand and tried to rescue her. But I, who was weak, was hugged tightly by Ingshi and ran toward the exit. Sheila, who was hit hard, fainted immediately. She was pinned to the ground by Xiaoming. The sheer force of it leaves Sheila with no room to move, and she wakes up gasping for air. And above, Xiaoming continues to scoff. "Are you familiar with this stance? It's a powerful martial art from a certain country. I learned it when I was a police officer there, and I was amazed at the quick and unique moves you made earlier. But everything is different now. What are you going to do next?" Sheila slowly opens her eyes at this point. She looks at the 2 little girls running away and thinks, "Get out of here." But Ingshi was frozen in place by the scene in front of her, because the principal appeared in front of the 2 of them with his teeth and claws. In an instant, Ingshi is trembling with tears in her eyes. Just when she didn't know what to do, a woman appeared behind the principal and knocked him out with a blow. "Don't you touch my daughter, you dirty old man." Ingshi saw her mother save her in the moment of crisis, and tears instantly poured out of her eyes like a dike. The woman who finally saw the child dropped the wooden stick in her hand. A woman who holds her daughter tightly in her arms and cries, "Don't be afraid anymore. It's okay now. You're not hurt, are you?" Seeing her mother after a long time, Ingshi replied with tears in her eyes, "Yes, I'm fine." Then she apologized, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I will never say that again. Thank you for coming." What they don't know is that I almost suffocated in the middle of the crowd. At this point, Bear and a group of red cloaks came out of the shadows and asked Rongjuan, "Are the children all right?" "The children are fine, but I don't see your wife." When I heard this, I quickly said, "My mother and Sheila are fighting the big monster. You guys go and support them." But Ingshi told us to get out of here. While they were arguing, there was a sudden pounding sound in front of us. Looked closer, they realized it was Zombie Queen with spikes all over her body. My father and I were stunned by what we saw. But the red-clad guards on the side instantly raised their hands to snatch. A few of the men who thought Zombie Queen was a monster yelled, and then they were about to pull the trigger. In the nick of time, Barry yells out to stop it, and it doesn't get any worse. Then he yelled, "Keep your guns away from my wife." He then quickly runs in the direction of Zombie Queen's fall, leaving Ingshi and her daughter in confusion. The bear pulls out all the spikes from his wife's body. He took her in his arms and asked, "Why are you here? What happened?" Unbeknownst to them, the one-eyed monster had already arrived behind them and said, "If you want to live, give her up." After hearing this, Little Bear turned his head and looked with question marks on his face. The people behind him also looked at the monster in front of them with surprise on their faces. Seeing that the situation is not right, I quickly pointed at the other side and told my parents to run. When I heard the sound, my father immediately hugged my mother and quickly left. The guard in red on the side saw this and quickly opened fire. But bullets that can pierce steel can't damage it. Just when a few people thought it was wearing body armor, the one-eyed monster has pierced one of them through the abdomen. The teammate next to him sees this and immediately tries to pull it out, but no matter how hard he tries, he can't rip the tentacles out of the other guy. In the blink of an eye, the blood of the person whose body was pierced has been drained by the other side. The crowd that saw this scene panicked and didn't even know what was going on as their teammate withered and died. At this time, the one-eyed monster was impatient. It wants to eat something, but it doesn't know which food to try first. With that, it quickly sends out countless tentacles towards the crowd. In the next second, the red-robed guard in front of it was pierced through. Sucked a few minor characters dry in a few short seconds. Rongjuan was able to escape by crouching on the ground with the woman in his arms. The one-eyed monster lets out a contented laugh as he eats his fill. The one-eyed monster looks at the corpse on the ground and laughs. That was a good meal. After he finished speaking, he took a closer look and realized that something was wrong, because the ones it didn't kill have disappeared. But he smiled smugly and said, "I'll give you a chance. Forget what happened today and give you a new life. If you keep this secret, give me the yellow-eyed guy and her daughter. In that case, I'll make you a miracle." Just when I thought no one would betray our family, a woman has come at me with her teeth and her claws. My father, hiding in the back of the car, hears my pleas for help, but it's too late. Because at that moment, the woman had pulled me to my feet and walked toward the one-eyed monster, saying, "I brought her daughter as you asked me to. Soon the yellow-eyed monster will be brought to you as well, so please keep your promise to let the town live as it did before." Rongjuan and Ingshi heard the voice and felt something was wrong. Just as Bear thinks the woman will give her daughter to the one-eyed monster. Instead, the one-eyed monster replied coldly, "Woman, what are you? Why should I follow your words?" After saying that, the sharp blade in his hand had pierced through her body, and then he said, "Each of you has your own value. Just as a screw has a fixed position, you all have your own place. And the community raised by those who know their place accomplishes the value of a group, but because of your greed ruins it. Through the principle, I have given you a life of purpose, provided you with a safe life, including food and shelter. Therefore, we have the right to decide how you live your lives. Becoming our food is part of your worth. It is a mistake to entrust the responsibility to the principal. From now on I am your true leader." And standing below the one-eyed monster, I was already trembling with fear. Rongjuan, who saw this scene, was also scared out of her wits. There is actually such a monster behind her. What should I do now? At this moment, the bear was so angry that he gritted his teeth and thought, "Come on, think about it. There must be a way to kill that monster." Zombie Queen, who was seriously injured, is slowly recovering. After a few minutes, her eyes suddenly glowed with a golden light, and she had to kill the monster in order to protect her family. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Sheila has broken free from Xiaoming's grip. If it weren't for the founder, he would have killed Sheila without pain, but Xiaoming valued her talent and ability. He also said to Sheila, "If you become my woman, I promise to let you imagine a life with a future. Nothing can hurt your life here compared to the hell outside. We have monsters in our family too, like me. I'm sure you'll recognize that too. Isn't that fascinating?" Sheila listens but laughs. "You call that a happy life? You are their slave, but you are happy. You must have lost your mind in that pathetic life. How's that for a happy life? You want me to live with you like that? Only a fool would choose that. The most important thing is that you look like shit." Xiaoming is furious when he hears this. Xiaoming then grabbed his weapon and quickly charged at Sheila. Attacks while shouting, "I need some time to convince you." Facing Xiaoming's strong attack, Sheila, without a weapon in her hand, can only use her scarf to block it. But the other man says to her as he fights, "You don't agree? But we all need the protection of our parents to survive. If you're with me, they gave us a quality life, so sacrificing our lives in exchange is a noble act." By now Sheila was gasping for air as she was bleeding from her opponent's 7 holes. Eventually, she is unable to dodge, and is hit hard in the stomach. But Sheila, still breathing, is still holding on. It doesn't matter if you're a slave or an animal, because the fact that we're family won't change. The zombie queen on the other side wrapped her daughter in her tentacles. The unresponsive monster looks puzzled at this scene. But my mother had already thrown me behind her. My father caught me steady. Seeing that I'm safe, my mother immediately assumes a fighting stance. But she was badly injured and needed time to recover. With that in mind, she rushed to distance herself from one eye, followed by a quick spiked attack at it. But that doesn't hurt the thick-skinned one-eyed monster one bit. It scoffs at Zombie Queen's attack. "My body has no senses to feel pain, so your attack is a waste of time. I will spare your family if you surrender as a sacrifice to my father. Even if you manage to escape, that won't change." She is slowly recovering from her wounds and attacks the one-eyed monster. But the opponent is counterattacking while chanting, "If you do this, only eternal pain awaits you. This is the only fate you will face, the same for all the other livestock hiding here. Without us, you'd only live in fear of being eaten, as helpless as a newborn. That's why you're our children." At this point, the battle between the two monsters has reached a fever pitch. but the one-eyed monster keeps saying, "Zombie Queen, I've built a village for you." After that, Zombie Queen's abdomen is pierced by the opponent again. Zombie Queen is suddenly attacked in the back. In the next second, bullets are raining down on his back. It turns out that Rongjuan is the one raising his gun to shoot back, and some of them are angry at him. Does this really mean anything to you? The little bear who was shooting also shouted, "What kind of parents would take advantage of and eat their children?" Think about it from our perspective, you idiot. The bullets don't hurt the one-eyed monster, but the verbal assault is starting to make it angry. Rongjuan's group shoots and speaks to the monster. "Can you really enjoy life while waiting to be eaten? What we need is a future without monsters, a village where my daughter can live in safety." At this time, under the joint attack of Zombie Queen and everyone, the one-eyed monster began to be unable to withstand it. Suddenly, it senses a danger coming from its right side. Zombie Queen kicks it in the arm, but she can't hurt it. Zombie Queen is smart enough to see the enemy's movement and quickly pulls away from it. Zombie Queen's eyes are glowing with anger at the one-eyed monster's constant stream of spoken word attacks. "That's enough, you idiot. Parents aren't kings." Under the constant and forceful attack of the crowd, the one-eyed monster's chest is also broken through a crack. At the sight of this, he suddenly remembers that Zombie Queen has been attacking like this. He was so angry at the thought that he opened his mouth and growled, "Why don't you understand? We offer you a life full of happiness." But the Zombie Queen was rapidly charging towards him as she shot out her spikes. The one-eyed monster thinks he's invincible and keeps yelling, "You're all making a mistake, and you're going to lose everything." But Zombie Queen replied, "What mistake? I'm not going to enjoy your so-called family life." At this point, her right hand began to change as she approached the one-eyed monster. In an instant, it has turned into a razor-sharp spine. She then rushes towards the one-eyed monster and yells, "Die!" In the next second, she pierced through his opponent's chest where it had ruptured. Meanwhile, Xiuming and Sheila on the other side had stopped fighting. Only the latter grabbed his opponent's weapon and said, "I'm sick of your crap, you idiot, try to change your mind." With that, she grabbed the weapon and hit her opponent hard in the face. Unprepared Xiuming's eye is instantly bloodied, but Sheila doesn't give him a chance. By the time Xiuming reacted, it was too late, and then the shovel strikes him in the face again. But Xiuming is still talking in the face of Sheila's powerful attack. "This is your last chance. Why are you so stubborn? We're here to be ruled, that's why we exist." But at this point Sheila didn't want to listen to him at all, and with that she tightened her grip on the shovel in her hand. As she approaches Xiuming, she waves the scarf in her hand. "Damn man, go to hell!" And then she hit him hard on the head with a fatal blow. Unprepared Xiuming was beaten and bloodied, followed by a heavy sideways fall to the ground. Sheila is finally relieved to see that her opponent has no strength to stand up. She then wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and laughed. The joy of being ruled is a joke. At this moment, the Zombie Queen on the other side of the room's sharp spikes have already penetrated into the one-eyed monster's chest. He looked so confused that he didn't know what the hell this was. Zombie Queen sniffs and laughs under her breath. "It's time for this to end. My plan worked. The venom will spread and kill you." But before Zombie Queen could finish her sentence, the spikes on the one-eyed monster's body were already coming at her. Luckily, she reacted in time and dodged backward. The one-eyed monster laughed at this and said, "My death will not be the end of this. Now enjoy your brief moment of freedom. Your death will come eventually, and I will not die." Zombie Queen then saw an unbelievable sight. The one-eyed monster's body is expanding rapidly. Families have to stick together, right? Zombie Queen gasps at the sight. With no time to think, she swings her spikes at her opponent. But the one-eyed monster laughed and said, "It's too late to react now." After saying that, the spikes on his body immediately shot towards Zombie Queen. She immediately uses her tentacles as a shield and retreats. The one-eyed monster's head splits off from its body. The flying spikes have obliterated the surrounding monsters. The principal, half dead on the ground, is in a cold sweat. "There's no time, I'm going to go out there and kill them all. I gave myself to this village, I fed and sheltered them, and this is how they repay me?" Before he could finish his sentence, I punched him in the head from behind. With a puzzled look on his face, he immediately turns his head toward us. But he saw my father and I angrily saying to him, "Old man, where are you going?" The principal was instantly cowed by the scene. The next thing you know, several people are flanking him. The principal was forced to tell the truth. "It's all for the sake of the village. If it wasn't for me, the village would be over. I'm human, of course. I feel guilty for those who sacrificed, however their sacrifice was worthwhile. Because their sacrifice can bring temporary peace, I did my best. What did I do wrong? Rongjuan gritted his teeth at this and chided, "Don't act like you're a victim. You use your family to prolong your life. You live like a king. You look around at the corpses all over the place, it's all because of you. Now this village is no longer yours." With it she raised her gun and aimed it at the principal, who was sitting on the ground. He's shaking with fear at the sight. But Rongjuan has already shot him in the head. Having completed her mission, she instantly sits on the ground in exhaustion, but she still whispers in a loud breath that she and the village are safe. "I'm sorry it took so long. Don't worry, I'll be with you soon." All this she said to her dead husband. After the war, the village changed a lot in just a few days. The bodies of the principal and the monster were disposed of. And finally a small memorial service is held for all those who have died. It was decided that all access to the basement would be blocked off to keep a lookout. Then drive out all those who were harmful to the village. When the secret was revealed, most of the villagers left with food in bags. The wounded are all being treated. And our family is finally together with peace of mind. Sheila's face shows obvious jealousy when she sees the happy family. At that moment, Ingxi's voice suddenly calls out "Mother" from the side. Ingxi's mother is still lying on the hospital bed with saline solution. She would definitely be happy if she could see the current village and her daughter. I hope she wakes up soon, too. Meanwhile, Xiuming has escaped outside. But the outside world is now a mess of mutated monsters. Even the birds flying in the sky have turned into giant four-legged, crawling monsters. And the unlucky Xiuming runs into his opponent soon after he comes out. But by now, he's all bruised up and gasping for air. He's been cornered by a broken weapon. Then he ran into a giant mutant pigeon, just when he was about to fight the other party for his life. But then he saw a tentacle go through his opponent's head. Xiuming is puzzled by the sudden appearance of his savior. But when he saw the real face of the other side, he was so shocked that his face turned black, because it was their powerful father. Then Xiuming was asked to give him an account of what had happened. He had no choice but to tell his father, the one-armed king, everything. The village disappeared after the death of the principal and founder, he says. Xiuming gets down on one knee and apologizes to his father for not completing his mission. "You gave us our precious home, but it was destroyed at our hands. I'm truly sorry." Finishing his sentence, he grimaced and shivered from the pain of his wounds, but still put on his composure and said, "I know my role is over, and I know I can no longer be your son. But it was you who gave us life in our time of despair, yet we lost the precious village you gave us." He growled at the sky in anger. "I don't want it to end like this. I'd appreciate it if you'd allow me to kill them for you, father. It's the last wish of your foolish son." After saying this, he got down on both knees and asked his father to give him the same power as any other member of the family. And then, with tears streaming down his face, he trembled as if he was afraid that his father would blame him. Hearing this, the one-armed king then turned to look at Xiuming and said, "The pain of realizing you didn't do your best is 10 times greater than the pain of failure. Here's a quote I learned from a book. Anyone can make a mistake, your results can change." Saying that, he stroked Xiuming's forehead with his only remaining hand to indicate, "If you learn from your past mistakes, it's just part of growing up." Xiuming thanked his father with a sob at his words. But then the other guy says, "You've gone too far this time. I realize now how useless you are." Immediately after, Xiuming's head was already bleeding, and it was clear that the one-armed king refused to forgive him. "You are only to blame for being inferior to your enemies. It's all because you've been living in comfort for so long." By now, Xiuming's 7 orifices are full of tentacles. Xiuming dies in place after the one-armed king pulls out the hand on his head. He then turns around and sighs, "I shouldn't have trusted those filthy creatures. That woman, she's grown beyond my expectations. I can't waste any more time. It's time to take action." At that moment, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "So what do we do now?" The one-armed king turned around with a puzzled look on his face and looked at him. But all that was said was, "If you send more families, they'll all die. If we don't hurry, it's going to be harder for you, father." And then a hand came out from behind the wall. But the one-armed king said, "Like you said, they will die senselessly. But there is another way, and that is for me to do it myself." But the man behind the wall said, "It's too risky, and you're still not fully healed from the severe injuries you received earlier." But the one-armed king looked confident and said, "It's the only reasonable course of action. Prepared from the beginning, now is the time, now that I know this village like the back of my hand. And I have you to help me with my plans, so I need your help, Jack." A masked creature slowly peeked out from behind the wall as he spoke. He whispers, "I may not be of much help, Yet the one-armed king trusts this helper. Immediately afterward, he held the sleeve of his broken arm and said, "If my body was intact, I wouldn't be in so much trouble. If it wasn't for her, my body wouldn't have been torn apart. I would sacrifice everything to get my body back." The key is the child. She's not affected by the light at all, so she must have taken the core. If we can get the kid's body, the plan is at least halfway there. So now the kid is our top priority. Time flies. Soon it will be 2 months later. And our family stayed in Hope Village as we had hoped. And I finally got a new dress. When my mother saw me, she let me go up and kiss her. When my father saw me, he kissed me on the cheek. But he let me go because I was too busy studying. But when I got out of the doorway, I froze in place with a puzzled look on my face. Then I sighed and said, "I don't care. Because every time it's study time, I naturally get a big head." Luckily, every time I got a question right, Auntie Rongjuan would encourage me. And Ingshi often studies with me. Sometimes when I'm tired, I go outdoors to play ball games. But this day, when we were having fun, I accidentally hit a ball into a very domineering woman in the village. She came up and yelled at me, "It's that monster's daughter." I froze in place and didn't dare to move when I heard that. Just as the two were about to remove the bandage from my finger, I turned around and quickly ran off into the distance. But the two men were shocked at what they saw, because Sheila was staring at them with a serious look on her face. Without thinking about it, the person who just scolded me rushed to apologize. But Sheila didn't want to let them go at all, so she put them on the ground. On the other side, I was feeling sad. My father suddenly appeared to comfort me. "What's wrong?" In an instant I replied with tears in my eyes, "I hate it here. I want to go home, back to the home we had before." But my father patiently told me, "I understand, but not now, because the evil monsters know our home, so it's dangerous." At that I sighed. Monsters are scary, but the people who hurt my mother are worse. I know everyone here is nice, but some people say bad things about my mother. And mother is a good person who loves her family. She's not only very warm, but she's a loving mother. I feel bad when people say bad things about her. I was already in tears and crying when I finished. My father didn't know what to do. He could only keep reassuring me that I would try to solve the problem as soon as possible. Those people are afraid because they don't know her like we do. Upon hearing this, I commiserated, because they don't know. Should we show them her true colors? My father, however, stroked my head and laughed. "How marvelous is she? Then let everyone in the village love her." With that in mind, I let my mother come into the limelight at night. And she goes out every day to find a lot of food. But when they saw her fierce look and sharp nails, people still talk about my mother's. I suddenly shouted from behind me that she was good to all of us. And the most important thing of all, my mother never bit anyone. The people around us burst out laughing when they heard that. The mother, who had never seen anything like this before, blushed. I waved my hand in greeting to avoid her embarrassment. My shy mother responds unnaturally, and amidst the laughter of the crowd, she heads out of town in search of supplies. On the other side, two strangers are asking a wounded monster for directions to Hope Village. With only one breath left, he gasped for air and replied, "If I tell you, will you promise not to kill me?" But once they knew the answer, they raised their guns and pointed them at the monster's head. He was sweating in terror at the sight. But one of them said coldly, "That yellow-eyed monster from Hope Village almost died in my hands." On the other side, Sheila was still teaching the two people who laughed at my mother. To make her feel better, I brought her my favorite bear. When I said that my father had made it for me, Sister Sheila instantly shouted in exasperation, "It's not that cute. I'll give you a better one." But I replied, "I especially like it. Can you give it a name?" Upon hearing this, she thought for a moment and then said, "Then let's call it Sawyer. And it's a lovely name. It means beauty and prosperity." In fact, it's the very name that Sheila used to recite in her dreams when she was seriously injured. I laughed when I heard her name. I like it. It's a very precious name to me. Just when I was having fun, Ingshi suddenly yelled at us in a hurry. "There are two new strangers in our village. But we have enough people here now. My mother is trying to stop them. Go help her." And now the people of the village are looking on in confusion at the sounds of the quarrel coming from ahead of them. It was Rongjuan who growled, "You like our village, don't you?" "Yeah, that's what I meant. I've never seen a village like this before." While the three were arguing, Sheila and I suddenly poked our heads out. The two strangers turned their heads when they saw us. Rongjuan behind us, however, said, "He's Ha Chunpei, and he doesn't hear very well, so you have to speak louder." The girl next to him is his daughter, Xiaozi. He then rushed to introduce us to the two of them. But Sheila was staring straight ahead with a serious look on her face. Because Xiaozi is staring at us. And he's got this weird look in his eye, like he's got some bad blood in his eyes. Sheila's mind was suddenly alerted to a danger signal. The three women looked toward Ha Chunpei in front of them. Because his hand was holding a pen and paper and he was smiling and asking me my name. And I was young enough to tell him my name without hesitation. But I don't know if he did it on purpose, but he always mispronounced my name. And every time he did, he just kept laughing at me. I raised my hand and pointed at him and yelled, "My name is Jufu." But he grabbed my outstretched hand. Sheila's face suddenly turned dark as if she felt I was in danger. In an instant, she had grabbed the man by the collar. This scene instantly surprised and confused both women. But Ha Chunpei said calmly, "I'm so sorry. I heard that the girl's finger had changed color, so I was curious. One question I have for you guys, is there a yellow-eyed monster here?" Sheila sniffed coldly and replied, "If you want to know, go find out yourself." Rongjun immediately told them to stop. "Can't you see that there are children next to you? What if you hurt them? So let's just calm down and talk this out." But Sheila grabbed him by the shirt and leaned in. "What are you going to do when you find that monster?" Just as Ha Chunpei is about to reveal his purpose. Suddenly, Bear yells from outside the door. He is then seen poking his head out and asking Rongjun where is Jufu. The quiet is broken, and a few people give the bear a puzzled look. Only Ha Chunpei hastily inquires, "Are you the bear?" Upon hearing this he did not answer, but inquired as to why the two were here. Xiaozi, on the other hand, looked at the bear in front of him with surprise. Apparently all three of them knew each other from before, so they fought together during the zombie outbreak. And the bear is still the leader of the crowd. His mighty battles were greatly admired by those who followed. But he got separated from the crowd in the chaos. Ha Chunpei was surprised to see the bear again. He used to look like a simple and honest man, who knew he would form a family with a monster. When I heard him call my mother that, I immediately scolded him. Just as Ha Chunpei opened his mouth to flirt with me, Yuzhen punched him hard in the stomach. She then asked the bear with a tight lower lip, "Don't you have any regrets? Now that you've been targeted by the cannibals, which means they'll eventually come for you, you must protect your family from danger." Upon hearing this, the bear was at a loss for words. When he saw Yuzhen's resolute gaze, the bear, however, grinned, "I'll never regret it." Then remembered the scene where he met our mother and daughter 6 years ago. I was just a baby in my swaddling clothes. My mother panicked when she saw the bear. But he actually waved his hand and said, "Calm down, I've only got a few things you need. Is it okay if you throw me your backpack?" Upon hearing this, the mother suddenly opens her bloody mouth in a rage. The bear sees this and puts some baby formula and a blanket on the floor. But the mother still stared at him motionless. But the bear puts his things on the ground and prepares to turn and leave, and he doesn't forget to tell the mother, "Take care of your children." But the clever bear hides behind the wall and peeks out. Sure enough, after he left, his mother quickly picked up the items on the floor. She was pleasantly surprised to see that it was all mine. The bear, hiding in the shadows, turned red at the sight. But he's surprised that a monster can take care of a baby. In his heart, he wonders if he'll be next. Immediately afterward, he often came to deliver supplies to the mother and daughter in the days to come. As the days passed, the bear became familiar with us. He would make a face every time to make me happy. Whether it's windy or rainy, he's always there for us. And tell me fairy tales when I have time. When he sees his mother's hair growing longer, he will trim it with his own hands. Gradually, Zombie Queen began to care for Bear when he was injured. And so, she slowly accepts the love of the little bear. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that her eyes were very beautiful. And so the three of them grew closer and closer. That day, the bear said goodbye to his mother and daughter and prepared to go out in search of supplies. But he didn't get very far. Behind him, there's an enemy around the corner, staring at Bear as he walks alone. Unaware of the danger, he's still trying to figure out what to name the mother and daughter. When Bear returns, he sees Zombie Queen sitting on the ground. Seeing this, he hurriedly ran forward to greet her. Is the baby asleep? But what he saw in front of him made him break out in a cold sweat. Because at this time I already had a high fever and was sweating. Zombie Queen, who doesn't know what to do, is in tears. This scene immediately froze Bear in his tracks. With no time to think, he quickly ran towards his home. As he ran, he cursed himself for being a fool for raising a child in such an environment. If only he had brought some medicine earlier. Then a sharp knife suddenly appeared on his forehead. The bear dodges backward, utilizing his dexterity, but he still got a cut on his forehead from his opponent. The wounded bear falls to his knees, covering his wounds. A group of men with weapons approached him. At this time one of them laughed, "I thought you could dodge, but unfortunately this didn't kill you." The bear said angrily, "One eye, you asshole." But the other guy laughed with a disdainful look on his face and said, "It's no big deal, take out all the guns and supplies you have at home." The bear got up and said, "Take your men and get out of here, or I'll kill you." But One Eye said, "You've got it all wrong, you're not a hostage." The bear was puzzled. Because a voice came from the walkie-talkie, "Boss, the mission is accomplished, we've caught the monster." On the other side of the room, several people had already pressed Zombie Queen to the ground. One Eye laughed and said, "It's so delicious." At this point, the bear was so angry that his veins flared up. And One Eye in the walkie-talkie said, "Go get the weapons, we'll be much more powerful with those." But the woman with the walkie-talkie is looking at me with a happy face. She grinned immediately afterward. "What a surprise, I'd love to know what kind of women bear likes," she said, looking down at Zombie Queen who was kneeling on the floor. "I don't know why the bear liked this monster. The mother is a zombie, but the child is adorable." With that said, they were going to take the baby and sell it. Maybe they could raise her better than the monster's mom. The Zombie Queen down below is weeping hot tears and gnashing her teeth in anger. The gangster immediately turned his head towards her with a puzzled look on his face. But in the next second, he was killed by a few shots to the head. One Eye outside the house heard the sound and quickly turned around to look. Several of the thugs who were beating up Bear also turned their heads and looked around. Cubby, who was crouching on the ground, unaware of the situation, mumbles something about his children and his wife. One Eye comes up to the men and asks, "When did you call for backup?" But at that moment, the blood was pouring out of his forehead. One Eye swings his sword at him, unable to stand it any longer. But in the next moment, he asked the other side with a puzzled look on his face. Because a voice came over the intercom, "Did you get punched like an idiot? I know you can hear me, so stop pretending." The bear froze in place and gasped when he heard this too. The person on the other end of the intercom suddenly said, "I'm only going to tell you once, now give the intercom to Bear." "Are you his family? Let me talk to him, or should I bring his family?" The One Eye with the walkie-talkie listens and doesn't even think about it, casually tossing the walkie-talkie to the kneeling bear. He took the walkie-talkie and then asked what he wanted. But the person on the other end says, "You disappoint me. Is that why you've been going out so much lately? What kind of captain are you? To fall in love with a monster and a father who knows that's where it ends. Now it's best to give her the medicine and never see her again, and if you do, you don't come back." With that, the purple-haired woman on the other end of the intercom looked to the Zombie Queen on the ground and said, "Choose us or the monster?" The crowd outside immediately murmured after hearing this, "So he's really going to date the monster?" And then the intercom said, "That's disgusting, you don't have to do that, even if you need a woman. I never knew you were such a person, Cubby. I'm sorry, Yujin, it's all my fault. I'm very sorry to all of you." Yujin's face turned red as she listened, and just as she was about to tell the bear on the other end of the intercom, "It's okay," the bear said again, "Please tell everyone that I'm sorry, but I'm not fit to be captain at all, so choose someone else." Yujin looked incredulous when he heard that. The hand holding the walkie-talkie is shaking like crazy. A momentary reminder of the good times she once had with Bear. Eating 3 meals a day together. They even sleep together every day. Yujin gritted his teeth in anger at the thought. But then his partner turned his head and said, "We knew it would turn out this way. Maybe the bear really likes that monster. Let's play by the rules. Whoever decides to leave can do so." But Yujin was already in tears and said, "I love him, but it's a monster, Bear the idiot." Meanwhile, outside, the bear has turned on his companion. In the blink of one eye, he's knocked over the crowd that surrounded him. Immediately afterward, he dragged his weary body towards the shivering One Eye, who by now was slurring his words in fear. "Cubby, are you a monster? How are you still so strong after being beaten so many times? If you hadn't come after us in the first place, none of this would have happened." Before he could finish his sentence, Bear's fist hit him hard in the face. Calmly, he immediately said, "Waiting no longer exists for me." Then he quickly ran in the direction of the mother and daughter. Whatever monsters there were on the way, he killed them all. It didn't take long to get to where the mother and daughter were, and when he saw that they were safe and sound, the bear rubbed his head and stammered, "I named her Jufu on the way here, so she can live in a world full of blessings." The zombie queen looked at her daughter in her hands with great satisfaction, and her eyes were filled with love. Noticing zombie queen's blushing face, the bear said shyly, "Isn't that a cute name?" then scratched his head and said to Zombie Queen, "Anyway, I've been thinking about it for a while now. At first it was just curiosity, but now I want to start a family with you and Jufu together. Even though I have nothing now, I promise to be there for you and the baby no matter what happens." And then with a flourish, they put them hands on each other's shoulders. "So will you make me your husband?" But Zombie Queen's face calmed down when she heard that she should have been happy. Then she looked down and thought for a moment, then easily said, "Yes." In an instant, a long-lost smile appeared on the bear's face. Then he swore to Zombie Queen, "I will love you until the last moment." Hearing this, Yujin's face suddenly became incredibly somber as she thought to herself, "Must stay calm, I've been through hell and survived." In the next moment, her head was outstretched in front of her eyes, and even though Yujin was shaking with fear, she thought to herself, "You can't beat me that easily." But Zombie Queen didn't attack her, instead she sniffed Yujin's body. After a moment, Zombie Queen remembers where she seems to have seen her opponent before, as the scent seems to be something she smelled somewhere a long time ago. On the sidelines, I saw the two of them like this and immediately ran to them and shouted, "My mother only scoffs at suspicious people, you must be a paranoid person." The next second I followed my mother's example of sniffing back and forth on her, an action that left Yujin momentarily speechless. She wondered to herself, where the hell did Father and Bear go? Didn't they say they'd be back soon? Unbeknownst to her, Bear and Ha Chunpei were outside chatting happily, talking about the people and things they've met over the years and whatever they used to do when they were together. Bear is the alpha, so protects his family at all costs. After listening, Little Bear tightened the book in his hand and said, "Why do you want the yellow-eyed monster?" The bear then turns his head to look aside at Ha Chunpei, but he sees that the other side doesn't want to tell him what he wants, and he's smart enough to change the subject. He then asks Ha Chunpei, "How is the rest of the family? What about your son Chuanji and your much-loved Yujin? What happened to the others? Please say something, master." Ha Chunpei, who was sitting aside, clenched the cigarette in his hand and said, "Why are you asking me when you already know the answer, you idiot? They're all dead, don't you know that? They were all killed by the yellow-eyed monster." Saying this, he had become so angry that his forehead was bruised, and then he added, "I have seen one hell after another in this world, but nothing compares to it. Actually, the yellow-eyed monster he's talking about isn't Zombie Queen, it's the one-armed king. There were bodies everywhere they went. Whether they are humans or zombie monsters, they kill and eat them all. I can hear the flesh and bones of my family members crunching, even the sound of their blood splattering. But all I could do was save one of my daughters, and I never felt so helpless at that time, and I made a difficult decision that day." Ha Chunpei clenched his fists in anger as he thought about this. No matter what it takes, that monster must be killed. The bear on the other side of the room was so angry that he clenched the book in his hand. "That monster you said killed all of us. Not only did he kill my family, but he also killed my friends, so I'm going to find him and cut him in half." But when Ha Chunpei heard this, he laughed and said, "Don't worry, you don't need to go looking for him, maybe he's already in the village. Because he lost his family and the village, surely he won't sit back and do nothing anymore. So who do you think he will come to first?" The bear was at a loss for words. Ha Chunpei said that he would go for the weakest fat man, but Bear was adamant that it was impossible. We hadn't seen anything suspicious in the last 2 months. But Ha Chunpei laughed, "You're still as dumb as ever, you don't know he's hiding as well as he could be planning something." He then lit his cigarette and continued, "A brief moment of peace is the deadliest poison. A brief moment of happiness will soon turn to ashes. By the time you realize it, it's too late. Never let your guard down in extraordinary times. When you doubt everything, you must be prepared. The village you think is safe may be the most dangerous." Before the words are out of their mouths, a sudden scream rings out behind the two men. The two of them get up and head towards the sound. As he walked, Bear whispered, "I have a bad feeling about this." But what they see before them is so overwhelming that they don't know what to do. Cubby was even sweating in disbelief as he stared at the scene before him. He saw a man in a cap holding an unconscious woman on her knees. Seemingly sensing danger, he suddenly became very frightened. Seeing this, the bear immediately inquired, "Jinju, what are you doing?" But the other looked at himself firmly. Bear sees this as if he understands something, and thinks the woman has simply fainted. Jinju pretends to laugh at the answer and says, "That's exactly right. It happened so fast, I had to carry her to the infirmary quickly. Don't worry, take her there and she should be fine." But the bear seemed to see that something was wrong, and then coldly inquired, "Is that so?" Ha Chunpei chimed in, "I'm worried too." But Jinju is still pretending to be calm and replies, "Don't worry, I will take her to the infirmary to see a doctor." He didn't know that Bear and Ha Chunpei had already realized that he was lying. Not wanting to expose each other's behavior, Bear reaches out to tap the injured girl on the shoulder and says, "Let me help you, we should help each other." Something felt wrong when the bear touched the other's body. Because the girl's body was as cold as death, but it had only been 5 minutes since she screamed, so it couldn't have been that cold. Just as the bear was confused, Jinju shouted, "Did you not hear me when I said I'd take her? Is your behavior disrespectful of my opinion? Forcing me to accept your help is kind of bullying, isn't it? Dude, you'd better mind your own business." The bear laughed and said, "I'm sorry, I guess I was being nosy. Don't be angry, I'm just worried about the woman, please understand." Jinju listens but replies, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gotten angry." The bear rushes after him and asks, "Can I see if she's okay?" Jinju immediately looks up at the bear with a deadly stare, then says to the bear with a grim face, "That's it. I really hate your type, and right now I'm under a lot of stress, so why do you keep bugging me?" Hearing this, the bear was suddenly angry and clenched his fists tightly, while Ha Chunpei's face was expressionless. But then Jinju's next words startled them both. "I'm done. I can't take it anymore." Just as the bear was about to make the first move, behind the house, 2 men suddenly came out and asked, "What happened? Did that woman faint?" Jinju panicked at the sight. He thought to himself, "What should I do now that more and more people are coming?" At that moment, the woman being assisted moved her fingers slightly. This movement was noticed by the attentive Ha Chunpei, and as he is puzzled by this, suddenly, the bear on the sideline said, "So you're still going to be so stubborn? It only makes you look more suspicious." Jinju was sweating profusely at this point, and the bear said, "You leave me no choice. Now I can only force a check," and with that he tried to reach out and grab at the injured woman. Just when Jinju was so scared he couldn't do anything about it, Ha Chunpei suddenly shouted, "Don't touch her." Startled by the sound, the bear hurriedly retracted his hand back. Instead, the injured woman spoke up, "Can you stop touching me? That's not polite behavior, okay?" As he watched, the bear broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, "What just happened? I thought she was dead." At this point Jinju said to the two, "Can we go now? I think you've done enough. She needs to see a doctor now." The bear was about to go up to him, but Ha Chunpei pushed him back and smiled, "I'm sorry, we made a mistake. We won't bother you again." With that he rushed to get the bear to come home with him now. But the puzzled bear kept asking the other man along the way, "You think it's a bit strange too, don't you? What's going on? Shouldn't I investigate this secretly?" Ha Chunpei's answer surprised the bear. "Didn't you see the other side's unusual behavior? Never approach it alone. You're too big to see it, but I see it clearly. Just as you were talking to Jinju, I witnessed the injured woman's arm shaking, followed by her fingers twisting inexplicably, and her eyes were filled with horrible blood. It's clear she's not human." Meanwhile, Jinju, who had left, came to a dark corner and blamed himself. "I did it all wrong. I should have looked around more carefully." At this point his face has been scratched by his hand and blood is pouring out, but he's still blaming himself as if he doesn't know the pain. "I'm an idiot, they must be suspicious of me. It's all my fault, I've brought trouble to my father." A soothing voice came from the side of the room, "Calm down, Jack. You can't undo your mistakes by blaming yourself." A closer look reveals that Jinju is Jack in disguise, and that it is the woman who was pretending to be seriously injured who is speaking. Then he says, "Don't be too hard on yourself. Thanks to you I have enough information, son, I'm proud of you." Jack was relieved to hear it. The woman suddenly said, "It's time to take action." And her eyes glowed with gold, and then she said to Jack, "You're working the night shift today, right?" Meanwhile, on the other side, I was sleeping soundly. A hand suddenly reached out and tried to touch me, and before it could touch me, my mother swatted it away. It turned out that the person who wanted to touch me was Sheila, who had always loved me, and in a flash she said angrily to my mother, "Can I touch her?" But Zombie Queen gave her the finger and said, "Fuck off, don't touch my daughter when she's sleeping." The bear on the other side saw this scene and said helplessly, "This is a critical moment, why are you guys still arguing?" At this moment, Ha Chunpei, who was next to him, suddenly spoke up and said, "Everyone's here, right?" Bear heard this and rushed to say, "Sheila is like family, don't worry about her." Ha Chunpei then explains to the crowd what they saw outside, and Sheila asks Ha Chunpei if it's true with a puzzled look on her face. But he says, "I think Jinju and that woman are acting strange. I think that guy is behind all this. When did he come to the village?" The bear listened and replied, "It's been a month." Ha Chunpei, however, said, so that he would have enough time to put things in order. Zombie Queen, on the other hand, seems to be thinking about something. She then reaches out and grabs the quilt, wrapping her sleeping daughter in it. She thought to herself, I don't want Jufu to run into that thing again. They must be hiding in this village to get me in her. Jufu was indeed an easy target for them to get. I have to kill that monster to end this once and for all, and if I'm right, the monster must have guessed it too. At that moment, Sheila suddenly blurted out, think about it, it's been quiet here for the past 2 months, do you know why? I mean, they're being cautious with us. He doesn't think violent methods like before work, so he's being careful this time around. In that case, the enemy's boss may have taken matters into his own hands this time. Yujin, who was listening, then said, if Sheila is right, we should keep one eye on Jinju, as he may be connected to the monster's father. And the woman who was with him, at which point the bear suddenly said, we still need to be cautious. Although we have clues, we can't let our guard down. We'll investigate the woman and Jinju tomorrow. And Ha Chunpei, who was sitting on the sidelines, laughed out loud after listening to everyone's speeches, only to be angrily scolded by Sheila, if Jufu wakes up I'll kill you. At this point, the bear suddenly held his index finger to his mouth and told everyone to be quiet. Because Ha Chunpei said, maybe we'll get lucky this time. It's as if he has a very good feeling that at least this time he'll be able to catch the tail of the monster hiding in the shadows. The crowd's faces became incredibly grim when they heard this. It doesn't matter if it's a bear or a zombie queen, and what they are most worried about is me. While everyone is preoccupied, the doctor suddenly breaks through the door. In a cold sweat and gasping for air, he says, we're in big trouble. I don't know how the top floor of the house suddenly caught fire. The whole village is now under Rongjuan's command to put out the fire. Several people in the house hear this and rush to follow the doctor out to check on them. Sheila takes a closer look and realizes that it is the village's granary. Bear rushes to ask the doctor, who was on night duty tonight. It was then that he remembered it was Jinju who was on the night shift. But Zombie Queen seems to know who did all this, but doesn't understand why he'd set fire to the granary. Because he was supposed to be targeting himself and his daughter. And the villagers were in tears as they watched the blazing fire. Some even fell to their knees in grief. After thinking for a moment, Zombie Queen suddenly thought about the reason why the other party did this. At this point, the granary has basically burned to the ground. The people below can only stare up helplessly at the flames. Zombie Queen suddenly sees something wrong with the people in front of her, and she seems to have noticed Zombie Queen looking at her. Zombie Queen breaks out in a cold sweat at this sight, because she could tell something was wrong with that woman. Zombie Queen can't think fast enough to hand the baby to her husband. Bear was about to ask her what she was doing. Zombie Queen is already running towards the woman. The villagers who were fighting the fire suddenly called for Bear to help. They don't know that the toxin on my fingers is spreading at this time. The Zombie Queen is now below the tower. When she looks toward the woman, she looks puzzled. Because the other woman had already reached the top of the building. And she's scoffing at Zombie Queen with a disdainful look on her face. Seeing this, she leapt towards the high platform with a single stride. In the next moment, she's right where the woman was. But no matter how much she looked around, she couldn't find the other woman. But her voice keeps coming from the empty building. I thought your senses would be dulled by a quiet life, but you recognized me quickly. Are you happy? Starting from the life you took away my home. A steady stream of sound reaches Zombie Queen's ears. But no matter how much she checks with her sharp eyes, she doesn't find the other side. But the other side is still chattering away. Don't try too hard to find me because I just want to talk to you. If you don't want to talk about it, we can change the subject. Your family, or your lovely daughter. Zombie Queen's face turns into a scowl as she hears this. But the other party smiled and said, your daughter is cuter than before. I believe she will be even more beautiful than her mother. To Zombie Queen's surprise, at the same time as the voice came, her opponent had opened his tentacle-filled mouth from above her head and was biting at her. But the battle-hardened Zombie Queen suddenly senses the danger. The next second, Zombie Queen reached out and grabbed it upwards while shouting, you damn monster, I finally got you. Followed by a hard slam of the one-armed king onto the ground. How could the mighty man be hurt by such a small attack? As soon as he hits the ground, he quickly launches himself at Zombie Queen. But she's no slouch, she dodges the attack with ease. But the one-armed king's tentacles have grown spikes. Just as he brings all the spikes together, Zombie Queen has disappeared. When the one-armed king found her, it was too late to dodge. At this time, the Zombie Queen has jumped into the air and attacked her. By the time the two monsters hit the ground, her blood had already stained the ground red. Seeing her opponent's weakness, Zombie Queen immediately scoffed. Is this the best you can do? Now you've lost all your advantages, and Zombie Queen wants to end this once and for all. But just as she finished her sentence, the one-armed king let out an oozing laugh. Does your daughter's stomach hurt? The Zombie Queen on the other side of the room listens, but asks the other side with a puzzled look on her face. What do you mean it's a stomach ache? Don't try to. Before she finished speaking, she seemed to think of something. She then rushed to ask how she knew. Because she was right next to her daughter when she had a stomachache. The one-armed king laughed sinisterly at these words. You're not the only one who has precious memories with her. She likes to play ball, don't you know that? And I also know that she really likes soup. Did you know she receives secret training 3 times a week? She's a good student, so young and energetic. 3 days ago she got an 80 on a test and was so happy I finally understood what your family bond was all about. The Zombie Queen was so shocked that her forehead was wet with cold sweat. But One-Armed King is still chanting, if Jufu is still alive after I get my body back, then I want to try to raise her. Zombie Queen, who couldn't listen to any more of this, immediately charged at her opponent. But the One-Armed King has already backed up to the railing behind him. Then he said, do you want to kill me? Then find me. After saying that, she fell down towards the tall building behind her. It's too late to get the other side. Zombie Queen. The next moment the woman falls to the ground, her blood staining the ground red. Zombie Queen was at a loss for words. She thought to herself that she had been too careless. This was a trap set by her opponent, so there was no need to wait or look for it at all, when Zombie Queen suddenly saw a horrifying sight. Because the eyes of the villagers below are glowing gold. Apparently, the entire village of Hope has been infected. Coincidentally, at the time of the woman's fall, the villagers below thought Zombie Queen pushed her. Some even told Bear and the others to take Zombie Queen and leave. But Bear could only keep explaining that the real situation was not what it seemed. Rongjuan is also explaining. But the other side said, she intentionally set a fire to distract everyone's attention and then tried to eat people, and they caught her on the spot. Even pointed at the bear and said angrily, I knew this would happen, a monster who helps humans, she won't even say a word to her husband, why are you on her side? But Rongjuan knew that Zombie Queen was a good monster, and then retorted, be polite, I'm telling you the truth. But he said with a stern face, she's like a hungry beast that keeps eating people. But as soon as he finished speaking, his face turned to fear. Because the bear was so angry that he gritted his teeth and picked up his collar and scolded, what did you just say? You have no proof, don't make accusations. My wife didn't kill anyone. By now the man was screaming in terror, and the people around him were voicing their displeasure. Sheila is sick of hearing the noise. But her face is unusually serious, and she seems to have a bad feeling about this. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, my mother and I were talking and laughing. I'm playing with her with a puppy toy in my hand. My mother was watching me having a great time. She's also forcing a smile, but she's a little uneasy. Every now and then she thinks of the girl who fell, and the worst problem is that now 2/3 of the entire village is infected. The other person must have done it over a long period of time through food or physical contact. At this point, everyone here is its eyes and ears, and I can't do anything about it. Maybe the daughter and the bear are infected too. I'm afraid Sheila, who's always been against me, may not be able to escape either. Thinking about this, she could only persuade herself not to tell anyone about it, and that she must clear up this misunderstanding with the villagers. But if I tell them the truth now, it will only cause panic. What do I do now? I might be infected too. What if I can't control myself and turn to attack Shufu? I wonder if she's infected now. And if so, when will she reveal herself? At this point, Zombie Queen is very confused and doesn't know what to do. Seeing her happy daughter, she could only gently stroke her head with her hand. And I could see that Mom had something on her mind. But she kept smiling lovingly at me. I thought for a moment, and then I told my mother to close her eyes. When I was ready, I rushed her to open her eyes. At this point, I put a bear doll on my face and smiled and said, hello, I'm a fairy who can relieve all your worries. Immediately after that she waved the rag doll and said, nice to meet you, you look anxious, let me help you. Listening to the voice full of emotion and loving gestures, Zombie Queen not only felt relieved, but also slowly turned red in the face. But I am still using the doll to amuse my mother by talking to myself. Are you sure you didn't lie to Chuck Booker about what Jufu's mom used to say? Sometimes it's necessary to lie, because it's a dangerous world out there, but it's wrong to lie to your family. Because that family will be there to help you and support you. The Zombie Queen, who had heard this, stammered and tried to think of something to say. I suddenly reached out to my mother and said, if you can't say it, don't say it. If something bothers you, I'll always be there to help you. Then he put on a pitiful face and said, "Because we're family." Zombie Queen was in disbelief when she saw this. In the next moment, her eyes became wet with tears. And then she tried to reach out and touch her daughter. But in the back of her mind, she thought, maybe she's right. I should be positive about the problem. So let me be a liar for a while now. I'm sorry, Jufu, and I'm glad a fairy is looking out for me. I'll be sure to let you know next time I'm worried. I was delighted to hear that. It's a promise. And at this time, my mother seemed to have no more worries than before. She thought to herself, there must be a way to solve it. Everyone still has their own will. If I were that monster, I would control everyone as I pleased. But why doesn't he take the easy way out? In an instant, Zombie Queen is lost in thought. Is its power limited? It shouldn't have full control of the villagers yet. Then I may have a solution. At that moment, the bear suddenly broke through the door and shouted, I'm sorry, but I need to know what's going on. It's the only way I can do everything I can to help you. I know you're angry, but it won't solve anything. Please, you have to tell me. Hearing this, Zombie Queen reaches out and gently caresses the bear's cheek. I was shocked by what I saw. Because the mother was holding the bear's head and kissing it hard. And also saying to him, I can tell you, but it's not without risk, if it can only see or hear. This method works. I have to take advantage of its imperfections. So I have to find it and kill it as soon as possible. The little bear was gradually entranced by the kiss. On the other side, Ha Chunpei and Yuzhen are looking for something in the ruins. But all they found was burned garbage. Yuzhen then said, the fire destroyed everything. And then she suddenly saw something suspicious about the blood on the floor. She reaches out to her father for a flashlight. Then he rushes to shine it at the blood on the floor. And Ha Chunpei says, there's nothing here. Maybe this isn't the place we're looking for. But Yuzhen seems to see something suspicious. Because the blood on the ground was emitting a cloud of black smoke. Yuzhen's expression instantly became happy when he saw this scene. This is definitely the blood of a monster. Even after the fire, it still reacts to the bright light. Upon hearing this, Ha Chunpei stroked his daughter's head and said, this is my beloved child. You're wonderful. But Yuzhen was a bit upset when he heard this. Come on, I'm not a kid anymore. But his father giggled, you'll always be a child to me. Yuzhen blushes with shyness at these words. At this point, Ha Chunpei butted in. Now we identify the monster behind the curtain. Just as Yuzhen is about to state that he just needs to get the doctor's results now, a voice came, the results are in, let's go to the hospital. The doctor was seen coming slowly from the shadows. It wasn't long before they arrived at Rongjuan's place. Seeing the trio's anxious look, she hurriedly asked, what did you find there? Ha Chunpei said, we found clear evidence that they are behind this. Rongjuan, who realized the truth, held his head in his hands and said, what the hell did we just go through? Rongjuan asked the doctor, how's the decomposition of the body going? Ha Chunpei and his daughter turned their heads toward him. Then they saw the doctor holding a vial in his hand. I found something unexpected. And it was found inside a corpse's brain. After my observation, this is the real reason for her death, so someone is framing Jufu's mother. Apparently, the bug killed her. Yuzhen thought for a moment and then said, Jingzhu and the others came to the village a month ago. There was enough time to infect us. In other words, we all have this bug in us. Rongjuan's face turned ugly when he heard this. In that case, we're all under the monster's control. Ha Chunpei saw this and hurriedly asked the doctor on the sidelines, has the antidote been made yet? But he said helplessly, I tried to make the antidote, but the experiment did not turn out well. However, I found a way to make it work, and I developed a stronger antidote alone. The father and daughter were happy to hear this. But the doctor's words have left everyone dumbfounded. That's too risky. It would require a high concentration of toxin from Jufu's finger, and the side effects could cause the toxin to spread and turn her into a monster. If it works, we'll be able to destroy the bugs, but I don't know what the side effects will entail. I see, they have an antidote. It's very unstable, but maybe I'll give it a try. I guess that's the only option. Ha Chunpei chimed in, saying, we have to do something before everyone dies. Yuzhen says he's right, we're on the edge of life and death. As Rongjuan tearfully says, now I should let everyone know. At this point, the doctor suddenly makes a surprised sound. The two women on the other side of the room looked at the doctor with puzzled faces. Ha Chunpei is holding the doctor's hand with a scalpel. He doesn't know why he can't move his body. Ha Chunpei could see his yellow eyes. But then the doctor cried out in pain. The two eyes and the mind instantly begin to argue. The monster inside doesn't want the doctor to make an antidote, so it tries to control him by biting his tongue. But then Ha Chunpei swung a hard punch at his face. The two women on the sidelines were in disbelief when they saw this scene. The doctor had already fallen to the ground with a heavy thud. Ha Chunpei picks him up by the collar and says, "This could be worse than we thought," and he rushes his daughter to find a rope to tie him up. It wasn't long before the doctor was tightly bound with bandages and thrown under the bed. But Ha Chunpei scratches his ear and says, even though he's subdued, the monster can hear everything we say. Yujin, sitting on the bed, replied, using the eyes and ears of the infected, "This is deception." Rongjuan on the other side of the room says, "I'm sorry, I can't be of any help. Fortunately you two are not infected and are more free than we are, so I'll go out and clear up the misunderstanding." Ha Chunpei stops the conversation. "Wait, the situation is critical. We have to save them now." He turns and heads for the door. As he opens the door, he thinks to himself, "It's clear now that the monster is coming." Ha Chunpei, on the other hand, was grinning sinisterly. At that moment, there was a sudden noise from outside. Because the villagers on both sides are still out there arguing over the dead villagers. Just as they were arguing, Ha Chunpei appears and yells, "We'd better hurry up and get that monster." Yujin saw the atmosphere and thought, "I can't believe it's the same as that time." His father was arguing with his brother in the same way, and each of them had their own ideas. The older brother wanted to expand the team to ensure safety, but my father, who knew the dangers of the outside world, wouldn't allow it. And then he said to his son, "I know the old you would never have made that decision." When he heard that, he gritted his teeth. He had no choice but to bow to his father and apologize, saying, "I'm sick of all this, sick of trying to convince you. Now I'm going to leave, and those who want to be with me are on my side. I may not be right, but I have my own way of doing things," and after that he turned to leave. Before he left, he told the crowd, "I'll negotiate with the cannibals to protect you all." Upon hearing this, his father punched his brother in the face and cursed, "Are you a fool? You're going to get everyone killed." In an instant, the two gangs were at each other's throats. Yujin thought to himself, "If we don't stop this, it's going to be just as chaotic as it was back then. I have to stop them," but my body, her arms and clenched fists kept shaking at once. But in the next moment, she froze. Rongjuan stepped in between the two groups and said, "We're family, not enemies, and this is a difficult time." But he was pointed at by a man and scolded, "How can we be together if you don't listen to me?" The man in red behind her, however, stood on her side and retorted, "Don't you think he's ridiculous?" Ainshi, who was on the sidelines, heard this and shouted, "Mother, come and support us." But this comment completely angered the man. "I'm telling you, we need to get rid of that monster." But the man in red shouted, "You have no evidence, so give up. No matter how hard Rongjuan tries to persuade him, it will be of no avail." But the villagers think she's on the monster's side. Ainshi, who saw her mother being scolded like that, immediately retorted. Just as the two gangs were arguing to a standstill, a voice suddenly came from the shadows. "Look how pathetic they are. This is the kind of family they have in mind. Insignificant creatures believe in what they see. Take a good look at their ugly desires." Only the man on the sidelines suddenly said, "Yes, father." Rongjuan heard the voice and immediately turned his head toward the other man. But the man on the other side is still pointing at her nose and cursing, "Didn't you promise to keep us safe? You should prevent monsters eating people from happening. It is your incompetence that leads to such a result." The villager next to him gritted his teeth and agreed, "He's right, I've heard that this village is safe, but it's not safe at all. How are you going to take responsibility now that people have died?" In an instant, all the blame is placed on Rongjuan alone. She thought to herself, "I can't be weak here, as their leader I must lead them." Suddenly her collar was lifted by that man cursing, "This is all because you didn't do your job." Seeing this, my daughter immediately jumped in to stop it. But she's too weak to push the obese man, and it pisses him off. "You little brat, what do you care if the adults are talking?" He then slams his fist into Ingshi's face. The powerful attack instantly knocked the weak girl to the ground, but he was still cursing, "Don't make me angry, get out of my way. What kind of mother has what kind of daughter? If you had listened to me, none of this would have happened, you know?" Seeing his daughter being beaten, Rongjuan froze in place and didn't know what to do. The people on their side immediately shouted, "Why are you hurting a child? Are you trying to solve this problem with violence?" The man who heard this became even more aggressive, kicked that monster out, and her daughter as well. The man froze in his tracks with a question mark on his face. Because Rongjuan, who couldn't bear it anymore, was about to slap him with his hand. But in the next moment, she was blocked by something. The man and Rongjuan stared blankly at the scene before them. The man who appeared out of nowhere was the ever-serious Sheila. The crowd is silent at the sight of the visitor. Just when the villagers thought she'd be on their side, Sheila said, "Everybody listen up. I know you're worried, but please return to your posts. We'll talk about this later, but for now, let's focus on reinforcing the village." But the man on the other side of the table said angrily, "I'm not done yet. Do you know how much we've suffered because of that monster family? Come to think of it, we don't need them anymore now that we have the vaccine, so we don't have to risk it." But no sooner had he finished speaking than he was hit in the face with a bloody head wound. And then he fell back heavily behind him. Sheila clenches her fists and chides, "If you have any objections, please come see me." The villagers are shocked by this scene and say, "We will do as you say." Ingshi, who saw Sheila suddenly help her mother out of the crisis, hugged her around the waist. Rongjuan on the side also smiled and said, "The situation would be worse without you. I feel ashamed because I promised before to ensure the safety of this place. But now I can't even stop this. I feel like a failure as a leader." But Sheila listens and says, "You have to pull yourself together." But Rongjuan is still frustrated and says, "I'm limited and this could happen again." But Sheila urged, "Then as a leader you must act wisely, not in my way but in your own. I have faith in you." Rongjuan was in tears when he heard it. His daughter Ingshi rushes up to hug her mother to comfort her, but Sheila looks at the scene in front of her with a heavy heart. Because the old man who called out to his father is sneaking away. Sheila's brow furrowed as she thought, "There's something suspicious about that man." Then she remembered that she had passed by him on her way here. At that moment she felt something was wrong. As she thought about it, she was about to go after him. A man's voice suddenly came from behind her. Immediately afterward, she saw Bear's hand on her shoulder and said, "I need you to fix something for me at the hospital. Can you come with me if you have time? We need as many hands as we can get." But Sheila looks at the bear with a frown on her face. He winked and laughed, "Just this once, help out." Then the bear winked at her. And Sheila, who saw the bear's expression, seemed to understand something. Then she sighed and agreed helplessly. She then turns around and chases after the old man. She thinks to herself, she'd better find the old man as soon as possible. Behind her, the bear obediently asks Rongjuan, who is on the sidelines, to help as well. Meanwhile, in the room, tired of playing, my mother and I soon fell into sleep. Just as my mouth was watering and I was sleeping soundly, my stomach suddenly turned over and I felt a terrible pain. I woke up in a daze and needed to go to the bathroom. I couldn't help myself, so I got up and went to the restroom. But I stopped just as I was about to push the door open. Then I turned to look at Mom. She told me to stay here and not go anywhere. What am I supposed to do? But then the stomach suddenly hurt even more. Without having time to think about it, I quickly opened the door and rushed out. After I got to the bathroom and took a shit for a while, I sighed and said, "That's better." Sitting on the toilet, I said to myself, I just solved a big problem all by myself. But what to do now? I'm not sleepy at all. Mother's sleeping. Why don't I go play with Ingshi? Then I pushed the door and prepared to play with her. But then an old man appeared in front of me and smiled and said, "Hello, my dear, are you Zhufu?" Unaware of the approaching danger, I said to him respectfully, "Hello, Grandpa, I'm Zhufu." But he said inexplicably, "You look healthy as ever. Are you free now? If you have time, can I ask you a favor?" Then a hand was already reaching out towards me. I was dumbfounded by what I saw. Before I had time to think about it, I immediately turned around and ran away quickly. And the old man behind me was chasing me, reaching for me. I'm running and I'm looking back at him. I can actually see the monster in the old man's eyes slowly revealing itself. When I turned around to see the other side again, I immediately clasped my hands around my body and yelled, "Freeze!" Then I turned to the old man and laughed, "You can't catch me after I say freeze." The old man rubbed the back of his head and said, "I'm almost there." But then I shouted, "If you don't want to be it, you have to be the best you can be." And then I pulled my legs out and ran forward, saying, "If you want to be the king of the game, then study hard." But the other guy stood still and laughed. "Well, thanks for the advice." And the monster inside him said, "King of games, huh? That's annoying, but it's the best way to deal with children. I should try to tire her out. I've been waiting for this for a while." At this point, running ahead, I smiled and said, "Come and get me." The next second he threw me up in the air and played with me. Exhausted, I strangled his neck tightly. The monster in the old man's body was instantly choked to the point of breaking into a cold sweat. How could a child be so energetic? What did they feed her? But I have to be patient. I don't know how long it was before we stopped, tired of playing. Only then did I remember what my mother had told me. The old man said, "You've been playing too long, you should go home now." At this point, I held my head in my hands and said with a frustrated face, I'm in trouble now, and now my mother must be very angry. At this point, the old man behind me suddenly said, Jufu, this is for you. I saw him holding a pink package in his hand and said, this is a gift from Grandpa. I took it over and opened it to see that it was candy. The old man said at this point, thank you for playing with me today, can you keep this a secret? There was still a hint of defensiveness. I then asked him why. But the other guy said, because it's a gift of friendship from me to you. So you want to commit? Then he reached out and wanted to pull the hook with me. I froze in place as I saw this and looked at the gift he had given me. But the next second I said to him while pushing the hook, this will be our secret, no one is allowed to tell it. It wasn't long before I was rushing home. But my parents were furious and asked me, why did you sneak out to play games with Grandpa? At this point, I kneeled on the ground with an aggrieved face and whispered, I will never go out without saying hello again, I am sorry. My parents, who didn't believe me at all, kept asking me, so you were just playing a game? I was at a loss for words. I remembered the promise I made to the old man before we parted ways. All I could do was stammer and say, yeah, just playing a game. Believing my parents didn't ask any further questions, they took me to bed. In a daze, I thought about the precious gift my grandfather had given me. Tomorrow, I will give him a gift too, but what should I give him? I hope tomorrow will come soon. What I didn't expect was a tentacle to come out of the gift. The monster was overjoyed to see me sleeping like a dead pig. It then quietly drills its way through my open mouth. In the next second, the toxin runs through every vein in my body. Immediately after controlling me, I stand up and my eyes glow with a golden light. The unknowing father is still fast asleep. The loud snoring wakes the mother from her sleep. Confused, she whispers, it's like this first thing in the morning. What if it wakes our Jufu from her beauty sleep? Then her hand had slowly moved towards the place where her daughter was sleeping. She suddenly woke up when she found it was empty. This also wakes up Bear, who is sleeping like a dead pig. Worried about her daughter, Zombie Queen immediately gets up and takes a good look around. But she found nothing. She ran outside looking for me as she screamed. Bear saw this and immediately rushed up to join his wife in searching. Where on earth did she go? Could it be the restroom? After a few moments of searching, the couple finally finds their daughter nearby. At that moment, I was alone, staring at a tall building, not moving. The bear behind me, after seeing his daughter unharmed, said, you kid, don't you know how worried parents are about you? If you want to go out and play, you can discuss it with us. But at this point, it was as if I couldn't hear him at all. The bear exclaimed in anger, are you ignoring your father's words? This will not do. I'll spank you later when you get home. Unexpectedly, even though he said this, I still ignored him. Seeing this situation, he wanted to go up and teach his daughter a lesson. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to step forward, he was grabbed by his wife behind him, but Little Bear asked her with confusion on his face what she was doing. Zombie Queen is sweating profusely and stammers, look. And then I slowly turned towards my parents. At this point, my body is completely under the monster's control.